Hello, hello, I'm Katie, and welcome to the Season 1 finale of Retromade. Today, we wrap up our celebration of Kurt Russell and Patrick Swayze, the ultimate everymen of cinema. Get ready for one last look at their iconic careers. I think I'm going to start by sharing a few recent listener messages. The first one is a review, actually, so hint, hint, everyone. Give me a review, please. This is an Apple review. The title is Great Host, 5 stars, Charger91. Katie is a very kind and warm personality who does a great job hosting her show. She does her homework for all of the movies. She reviews and brings great insight along with her opinions. I have not listened to an episode in which I disagree with what she has to say about the films and look forward to checking out more episodes in the future. Her guests are insightful for the most part. And the atmosphere of the show is like having a good conversation with a friend. I recommend giving her a listen. Thank you, Charger91. Then on Podchaser, I think I've mentioned before, and there's a link on my Captivate site too, which is retromade.captivate.fm. If you want an easy link to Podchaser, if you are not an Apple user. This one is from Stephanie, and it's regarding the Mean season via Podchaser. Made me want to watch this movie. Scott and Katie have a fun discussion, and it was educational. I didn't know what Mean season meant. I didn't either. Also, at the beginning of each episode of Retromade is our childhood on a podcast. Love hearing the music news and shows of the time. Thank you, Stephanie. Oh, Stephanie also gave one about Grandview USA and Three's Company. My favorite part of this was Three's Company. Loved it. Yes, Terry was my favorite too. I had said that Terry was my favorite blonde roommate. She says, now I'll have to see this movie too. Hadn't heard of it before. And then here's one from Megan, and is just a general, not specific to any episode on Podchaser. I'm fairly new to podcasts and love this one. All of the nostalgic trips down memory lane from the good old days are fantastic, and many I've totally forgotten about until Retromade rewinds and reminds me. Music, TV shows, people, places, happenings of the time, fashions, toys, and of course, movies of the time. I particularly have enjoyed the theme of season 1. Patrick Swayze and Kurt Russell, our everymen. Katie does an excellent job preparing and providing all of the helpful info and has some awesome guests as well. Thank you, thank you. And I have a listener email, and this is in reference, it's kind of a general email, but also focuses some tidbits that I had requested feedback for from the fatherhood episode. This one is from Zoe Richardson from Backlook Cinema. He says, Dear Katie, how's it? I hope that you've had a fruitful year. I'd like to congratulate you on having your successful, very long season of Swayze and Russell. It has been a long season, hasn't it? They won't all be this long. It's just that Kurt Russell and Patrick Swayze had a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s that we had to cover, and I'll get into those numbers here in a bit. But back to Zoe's email. He says, I still like how you touch on the big things that happen in entertainment on the week of the movie's release. In the latest episode, you talked about Jodeci, and while you recognize their impact, you weren't familiar with their cover of Lately. Yes, Lately is a cover of a Stevie Wonder song. I actually couldn't remember it as I was listening to you. I had to stop the playback of the episode so that I could listen to the song. This is quite embarrassing as I'm a big Jodeci fan. I think I have all of their albums, so I should have remembered this song. While listening to all the memories came flooding back, the version that hit number 1 was their live recording on one of those MTV Unplugged shows, and they nailed it. You could almost tell that it's a Stevie Wonder song as you listen to it. As for Onyx, the rap group definitely has more hits than Slam. I had maybe assumed that it was a one-hit wonder, so thank you, Zoe. But for me, that's the one and only that really matters. I don't follow them that much. The only other song that I know that they did after some research was Throw Ya Guns. That's all I have. I just wanted to chime in with my 2 cents and encourage you to keep up the good work. Best wishes, Zoe. Thank you, Zoe, and right back at ya. All right. Well, I was glad to share some listener feedback. I would like some more if you guys want to send me an email, retromadepodcast@gmail.com. Always need those reviews and those ratings, comments on YouTube, etc. Keep it coming. Okay. So in this retrospective of season 1, I'm in marketing, so I'm very numbers oriented. So let's take a look there first. There were 40 movies, so that's why the season was so long. It's almost an even split. Kurt had 22 and Patrick had 18. But I will say that Patrick had North and South, which was a multi-season miniseries. So it was like multiple movies in one. So I would say it's pretty even between the amount of content from the 80s and 90s of our two Everymen. I was lucky to be joined by 34 different guest hosts. So all of you guest hosts out there, I hope you're listening. I want to thank you personally. And hopefully you'll be back to join me on season 2. We had 2 handsome hunks that we covered, and I dubbed them the Ultimate Evermen. I hope you guys agree. It kind of sounds like a lot of you do, but even if you don't, I'd like to hear from you. They're very similar in age, too. Does anybody know who's older? And by how much? Yes, Kurt is older, but only by about a year. Kurt was born March 17th, 1951 in Massachusetts. And Patrick was born August 18th, 1952 in Texas. Now, a long running gag of our first season was trying to get my guests to agree with me that I thought they looked alike, because I very much think that they look a lot alike. And I would say the long story short, in terms of the consensus, is that it was a mixed bag. Some people did, some people didn't. Some people very much did, some people very much didn't. Ultimately, I think I was able to twist some arms into kind of seeing it after I pointed it out. It's kind of one of those things, like when you buy a car, you only notice that car after you buy it, things like that. Anyway, just to recap some of the movies that we covered, I did not cover the season in a chronological order. It sort of turned out to be maybe a little bit front-loaded with the more popular films, and we ended the season with some of the lesser films, and that was likely due to guest picks. So by the end of the season, all the good ones, so to speak, had been picked. But we start with Kurt Russell covering the 80s and 90s movies of his career in 1980 with Used Cars. And then going up to 1998 with Soldier. So, Used Cars. Then we have The Fox and the Hound, where he voiced Copper. And that was released in 1981, the same exact day as Escape from New York. Then we have The Thing, and then Silkwood, Swing Shift, The Mean Season, The Best of Times, Big Trouble in Little China was 86, Overboard 87, Tequila Sunrise, Winter People, Tango and Cash, that's 89. Now Backdraft as we enter the 90s in 1991. Unlawful Entry, Captain Ron, Tombstone, Stargate, and in 96 we get the sequel of Escape from New York with Escape from LA, then Executive Decision, Breakdown, and Soldier. Very similar trajectory with Patrick Swayze. I did cheat a little bit. I started the season, or his first film role was actually in 1979. And that's just because it was his very first theatrical performance ever. So that was Skate Town, USA in 1979, and then Uncommon Valor in 1983, then The Outsiders, Red Dawn, Grandview, USA, North and South, the first season was in 1985, Youngblood, Dirty Dancing in 87. They both had spectacular movies in 87. Roadhouse in 89, both had spectacular movies in 89. Then Next of Kin, Ghost, starting the decade of the 90s, that was 1990. And then Point Break in 91, City of Joy, Fatherhood, Tall Tale, Three Wishes, To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, that was 95, ending in 98 with Black Dog. So they both had their last movie of that decade where they at least were top billed in 1998. So neither of them had a big movie in 1999. Interesting. You guys, tell me what your favorite Kurt movie is. Tell me what your favorite Patrick movie is from the 80s and 90s. That's the criteria for this season. You could probably tell from the episodes, but my favorite Kurt Russell movie is Overboard, followed very closely by Big Trouble in Little China. Patrick Swayze, Dirty Effing Dancing. And I had several guests, I feel like, that didn't seem into it or hadn't seen it. And I just cannot say it's not just for girls. Like, there's beautiful women. It's a hot, hot, hot movie. The music is epic, Dirty Dancing. Y'all need to rewatch it or watch it if you haven't. And then followed very closely by Roadhouse. Very clearly, I hated Stargate. That's my least favorite Kurt Russell movie of this season. Did not like it at all. There wasn't a movie of Patrick's that I didn't like at all. So it was kind of hard to pick which one was my least favorite, so to speak. Rambo's joining me. Usually, you guys, I have the dogs kenneled while I record, but I didn't this time. So that's who's back there. That's that tail wagging behind me. That's Rambo. So, okay. My least favorite movie for Patrick, it was kind of hard to pick one, but ultimately I went with Grandview USA. It was just weird. I didn't love it. It was my least favorite. Now, People magazine started their Sexiest Man Alive in 1985. And Kurt was never represented, which is kind of a travesty in my opinion, but Patrick was. Anybody have any guesses which year people honored Patrick? Patrick got our People's Sexiest Man Alive in 1991. There's several reasons why I wanted to put these two together. In addition to them both being super handsome, them being everymen, them reminding me of each other. They have a lot of connections, actually. So I want to talk through that with you. I will say there's even more. After doing the season, I recognized even more connections. So they're both pilots. Both of them had pilot's license. There is a Fox and the Hound connection. So the original 1981, Kurt voiced Copper. And then there was a second one. I forget which year, sometime later, but Patrick voiced a character in the second one. Cash was his name. Isn't that interesting? Kurt also played a character named Cash. But Cash was the leader of a band called the Singin' Strays. So there's a Fox and the Hound connection. Speaking of Tango and Cash, we talked about this in the episode, but Patrick was actually originally cast as Gabriel Cash in Tango and Cash that Kurt ultimately took. But he did Roadhouse instead, and I'm not mad at that. That's awesome. Roadhouse is a better movie, even though Tango and Cash is awesome. Kurt Russell was considered for Patrick's role as Jack Charles in Fatherhood, as well as the role Truman in Next of Kin. They both had athletic aspirations, but injuries turned them towards acting full time. So I don't want them to have injuries, but we got them as actors. So I guess that worked out for us. Kurt Russell did pursue baseball very seriously. He even played in the minor leagues before an injury ended his sports aspirations, and then he fully committed to acting. Similarly, Patrick Swayze initially trained as a dancer, attending Harkness Ballet and Joffrey Ballet schools, but transitioned into acting after injuries curtailed his dance and gymnastics career that he talks about in his book. Patrick Swayze and Lisa Niemi wrote The Time of My Life. That's the book I just showed. So if you guys haven't read it, this is another reminder for you. They both played truckers. So again, I know we talked about it, but truckers were hot in the 80s, according to cinema. Black Dog and Big Trouble in Little China. Duh. They were both in Westerns. Tombstone. Do you guys remember the Western that Patrick was in? So Tombstone for Kurt. Which one was Patrick in? Anyone? Tall Tale. They both dressed in drag. Tu Wong Fu for Patrick. And anybody remember Kurt dressed in drag in Tango and Cash? They both played cops. Patrick in Next of Kin and Kurt in Tequila Sunrise. Although I will say, I think Kurt played cops in several movies, especially later too. They both played military soldiers. Uncommon Valor for Patrick, and Stargate, Escape from New York, and Escape from LA. And then Kurt also played a cop in Tango and Cash. So yeah, Kurt has played a lot of cops as well as military people. So they both played cops. They both played military soldiers. They both played characters named Jack in a lot of movies. I know that's a common name, but I mean, come on. Can you guys think of them? So Kurt Russell, which movies did he play Jack? You know what Jack Burton always says in a time like this? Then we have Colonel Jack O'Neill. So that's from Stargate, right? Colonel Jack O'Neill. Now, Patrick played Jack Charles, Black Dog. He played Jack, a character named Jack in the movie Three Wishes. And then Jack Charles was Fatherhood. It's too many Jacks. And Jack Cruz in Black Dog. Forgive me. There's just too many Jacks to go around. Did you guys know that Patrick had a nickname? People close to him didn't call him Pat or Patrick. Anybody know what he went by? His dad was also known by this name. Anyone? If you read his book, you'd know. Buddy. People close to Patrick called him Buddy, and his dad was known as Big Buddy. So from a young age, Patrick was affectionately called Buddy by his family and close friends. The nickname stuck with him throughout his life, even as he rose to fame in Hollywood. Those who were close to him continue to call him that. It reflects the down-to-earth, approachable nature that Swayze was known for, both on and off screen. His Texas roots and warm personality made him beloved, not just by fans, but also by colleagues, family, and friends who cherished the nickname as a term of endearment. So rest in peace, Buddy. We miss you. They both got several awards, both good and bad. Well, let's see here. Where do we start? I will also talk about a handful of other standout movies that I didn't cover because they weren't either in the 80s or 90s, or it wasn't like a big theatrical release. So that was kind of the criteria for this season. Let's start with Kurt Russell. He was a 1979 nominee for a Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a limited series or a special for playing Elvis Presley. I think that was a TV movie. Then he was the 2015 winner, Hollywood Film Award for Ensemble of the Year in The Hateful Eight. I don't think this exists anymore, but I love these old ones, sort of like the TV Land Awards. But there's the AARP Movies for Grown-Ups Award. He was the 2004 nominee, Best Breakaway Performance for 2002's Dark Blue. Now, a little more on this. This has a 6.6 IMDb rating. I had not seen this movie before. I will say, listener of the show, Adrian from Sweden, this comes highly recommended by Adrian, who's disappointed that I didn't cover it. So Adrian, this is just for you. I hadn't seen it before, but because in addition to you shouting its praises, it was the nominee for Best Breakaway Performance. I did watch it for the first time, and I really was surprised because it's a very different type of role for Kurt. He's a dirty cop. Here we are with yet another Kurt role where he plays a cop. He's not a very likable person. It takes place, this is really interesting, in LA in the early 90s with a backdrop of the not guilty verdict of the Rodney King assailants and the subsequent riots. So that's the setting that this movie is taking place in. I really took note of the soundtrack. I am a big 90s hip hop person. So it has a fantastic soundtrack, including Eazy-E, TLC, and Wu-Tang. Incredible cast. So Ving Rhames, Brendan Gleeson. It was directed by Ron Shelton, who we talked about because he directs a lot of sports movies, and he did Best of Times. And two other actors that were also rappers. So it was really fun to see. Corrupt has a pretty big part in this. And then there's another person I was like, oh my God, is that Master P? It sure shit was Master P. And then his son in the movie I was like, God, who is that kid? I mean, it really looked like what Kurt would look like as a kid. And I was like, I wonder if that kid's related to Kurt in some way. Because he looked just like how you would imagine a young Kurt Russell. So much so that when I looked him up, he is Kurt's nephew. We did talk about Kurt's actual son playing the earlier version of himself in Soldier. This is Dark Blue, and his nephew plays his son in the movie. So that's super cool. Then Kurt was also nominated for that same Movies for Grown-Ups Award in 2005 for Best Actor for the movie Miracle. Critics' Choice Super Awards 2024 winner for Best Actor in a Science Fiction or Fantasy Series or a limited series made for TV movie, blah, 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 blah. Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, and that also got a Saturn Award nominee. This is so not my type of thing, so I have not seen it. I will just have to take their word for it, but I'm sure Kurt was wonderful in it. He got some not so great award noms also. So there's Razzies, and I actually just recorded a Razzie episode with friend of the show, the 80s and 90s Uncensored. So I'll be sharing that on my socials soon when that episode comes out. So there was a 2004 Stinker Bad Movie Award nomination for Kurt for worst fake accent for Miracle. He has a Minnesotan accent for playing the coach in Miracle. More on that a little bit later. I don't think that was warranted, but they did. He was nominated in 1990 for a Razzie for Worst Supporting Actress because he was dressed in drag in Tango and Cash. We covered that at the time of that episode. And then this one is, I find a little interesting. 2002 Razzie nominee for Worst Screen Couple. And now I haven't seen this movie in a long time. It's 3,000 Miles to Graceland. Now, this is Worst Screen Couple, and there's two versions of it with either Kevin Costner or Courtney Cox. Somebody might have to explain that to me. Was he a couple with both of them in this movie? I'm confused. Either way, the Razzies didn't love it. A few standout movies that we didn't cover. According to IMDb, that was my criteria for picking some standout movies that we didn't cover. 2007's Grindhouse / Death Proof. So, which is kind of a weird concept. Tarantino is like a double feature, and the second movie is the one that Kurt's in, and it's Death Proof, where he plays stuntman Mike. 7.5 IMDb. I actually didn't realize what the deal was, so I watched both movies of Grindhouse, and either way, I gotta say, I was honestly shocked by the high rating. 7.5 is extremely high on IMDb. So for Stuntman Mike, I think Kurt was good. I did very much enjoy Kurt as Stuntman Mike, but the dialogue for the girls, I just couldn't get past it. It was so overly done and like overly Tarantino'd, just massively unrealistic for how people actually speak, that it took me out of it. And I was just thinking, oh, this is just like Tarantino in his brain thinking a certain thing. But again, Kurt was good, but the movie, average at best, in my opinion. I have no idea why I got a 7.5. And I'm not like a Tarantino basher. There are some of his films I really, really like, but this not one of them. And then 2004's Miracle, where he played Herb Brooks. This got a 7.5 also on IMDb, and I do think that's worth it. We do not get to see Kurt's natural, luscious signature locks in this because he's wearing a wig to portray Coach Herb Brooks in this. So it's that very classic late 70s, early 80s men's hairstyle. My dad totally had it. In fact, he still does, just a shorter version of it. There were some fun accents. So he got kind of shat on by the Stinker Awards for his accent. But I don't know. I kind of liked it, but I get a kick out of accents, so I'm probably got the best judge. But lots of fun accents in this movie. We get Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, like that area of the country. We get a lot of that accent. We get a lot of Massachusetts accent because that's essentially most of the players were either in the Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota area or Massachusetts. I will say, since I broke my wrist being pushed down on an ice skating rink, I have a little PTSD watching the ice rink. Gotta say, I think I'll be forever changed now watching hockey or ice skating or whatnot. But I did very much enjoy rewatching this, and I think it's worth the 7.5 IMDb. Okay, so are there some awards and or some other standout movies that we didn't cover for Patrick Swayze? Sure. 3 Golden Globe nominations for Best Performance by an Actor in a Motion Picture, Comedy, or Musical for Dirty Dancing, Ghost, which also got a Saturn Award nomination, and To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. You guys, this really is a good movie. I mean, if you haven't seen it, it really is good. You got to watch it. You got to rewatch that movie if you haven't seen it in a while. The guys are just phenomenal, especially my Patrick. He got a 1992 MTV Movie Award nomination for Most Desirable Male in Point Break. Duh. And then 1989 BMI. Did you guys know what that is? I didn't. It's Broadcast Music Inc. They have awards. And he won for the song She's Like the Wind from Dirty Dancing. We've talked about this throughout the whole season because he shopped that shit around, and finally it got made for Dirty Dancing. And then he won a BMI for it. He also got nominated for a Razzie for Worst Actor in 2 movies the same year, actually. Both movies came out in 89. Next of Kin and Roadhouse. I mean, WTF. What? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Again, you'll have to be on the lookout for that Razzie episode that I did with another 80s and 90s podcast. We talk about how it's full of shit. Okay. I also wanted to call out the SNL Chippendales audition sketch with Chris Farley. This was aired on SNL October 27th, 1990. It is epic. It goes down in history. It's remembered as one of the show's most iconic sketches. Look it up. You're welcome. It was the first, actually, SNL sketch to feature Farley in a starring role. I didn't know that. And this was only his 4th as a cast member. So he was very new. And this was he just hit it out of the park. According to Farley's agent, Doug Robinson, a video of the Chippendales sketch was what led to him being signed by the talent agency CAA. Then I keep hearing about 2001's Donnie Darko. I'd not seen it before, but everybody keeps referencing it. So Jake Gyllenhaal is in that with Patrick Swayze. And then Jake Gyllenhaal went on to play Dalton in a Roadhouse remake. So it has an 8 on IMDb. That is extremely high. So I watched it. Now, Patrick is not, I think he's maybe the 4th or the 5th credit. So he's not the main character. Jake Gyllenhaal is, but he's a secondary character in this. It's very strange. It's a weird movie. It has a cult following, and I don't get it. I think maybe I just really don't get this 8 IMDb rating. I was bored. Perhaps if I saw it back then, back at at the age I was then, maybe, and or if I saw it multiple times or something, maybe I'd feel different. But I'm absolutely shocked that it has an 8 on IMDb. I was bored. I don't know. Maybe I'm really dumb, but it was not a good movie, at all. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm right. Tell me either way. Let me know what you guys think. Then, I wish I could have seen it. There's high praise for Patrick's last role. So he was in a 2009 TV series called The Beast, where he plays Charles Baker, a veteran FBI agent. It has a 7.7 on IMDb. It's very, very well received by critics, all praising Swayze's performance, but it got low Nielsen ratings because people don't know it's good, and it was canceled. And then Patrick Swayze passed away September 14th, 2009. He was only 57. God, that's young. From pancreatic cancer. So I think I looked for The Beast. I was going to try and check it out, and I can't remember. It wasn't easily available to watch, if I recall. But I will update you guys if ever I get my hands on it and I'm able to see it. I will try. So those are some awards, both good and bad, as well as some other movies that were rated very highly on IMDb that we did not cover on this season. Retro Junkies, that is a wrap for this season of Retromade. We have explored the incredible filmographies of Kurt Russell and Patrick Swayze, our Everymen, diving deep into the roles and the stories that made them icons of the silver screen, from heart-pounding action to heartfelt drama. These two legends showed us what it means to be versatile, charismatic, and unforgettable. Yes, our Everymen. Thank you for joining me on this cinematic journey through their remarkable careers. And stay tuned for exciting details about season 2, where we'll dive into the world of John Hughes. And I'm going to be introducing some brand new time capsule segments. So don't go anywhere. And to all of the podcast listeners and YouTube viewers, I cannot thank you enough for your support and coming along for the ride with me. Your enthusiasm and love for these classic movies keeps the nostalgia alive and thriving. If you enjoyed this season, I would really, really, really appreciate it if you could spread the word, share the podcast with friends, post about it, help keep this retro conversation going. And of course, if you do have a moment, please leave a review. It's not just for my ego. Reviews are a huge help in growing the show and helping more retro film fans find the show. And there's ways to contact me. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, or even ideas for future episodes. You can reach me at any time at RetromadePodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to show some extra appreciation for this season, I would be so grateful for a monetary tip. You can do that through the last link in the show notes. The details, when you go to a podcast episode or on YouTube, it's the last link usually. Or you can always go to retromade.captivate.fm, and it's at the bottom of that website as well. It's a small way to help keep Retromade going and ensure that I can continue bringing you these nostalgic deep dives that hopefully you love. Thank you again for being part of the Retromade community. Until next time, be kind, rewind.